The principle of proportionality. A cycle's influence on market movements is directly proportional to its length. Longer cycles will have a more pronounced impact on price than shorter ones. Key aspects. Larger cycles dictate the primary trend. Smaller cycles refine the picture, adding layers of detail. Principle of proportionality, in my opinion, is a little obvious. Let's say there's a 4-year cycle in a market. Obviously, that is more impactful to price action than a 20-day cycle. Why? Because it's longer. And this is what the principle of proportionality states. The shorter the cycle, the less it will move. The longer the cycle, the more it will move. And here's an example. I believe this is Bitcoin in 2021. This is a yearly cycle. This is the next one. You can see that cycles moved a lot more in this red highlighted cycle than they have in this one or in this one. This is a direct result of the principle of proportionality. The longer the cycle, the more meaningful it is. This red wave is a year-long cycle. It's actually about 15 months in duration. These are 3-month cycles. Obviously, prices are not going to move as much during that 3-month period than they will over a 15-month period. And this is the principle of proportionality in action. Again, the longer the cycle, the more it will move prices. The smaller the cycle, the less it will move prices. Larger cycles dictate the primary trend. Smaller cycles refine the picture, adding layers of detail. Let's go back to the Bitcoin picture. The big cycle, the 15-month cycle, defined the trend, the red wave. This red wave, it explains what happened to this market. It went up significantly, and then it went down significantly. The smaller cycle, the orange one, adds layers of detail. So typically, the principle of proportionality will describe what you have seen in any uptrend. If you've ever looked at a price chart, you will notice, even during an uptrend, prices go up and down. This is proportionality in action. We have a long-term cycle moving higher. However, within that long-term uptrend, within that large cycle moving higher, smaller cycle components are topping out, going down, bottoming out, going up again. You can see that even within this yellow cycle, there's a lot going on here. There's a lot of noise. Remember, go back to the principle of summation. Price action that you see in a chart is a result of adding many cycles together. But usually there's one large long-term cycle that is defining the trend, and then there's smaller cycle components that are giving you a bit more detail. Now, it's not worth it to understand what is happening to a 10, 5, or even 20-day cycle if all you're concerned with is a larger 15-month wave. However, it may be important for you to be aware of what is happening to an 80-day cycle. I'm not saying I recommend this, but you could try to sell tops in this cycle and buy the bottoms. There's tools to recognize all this. But the important takeaway from the principle of proportionality is that you have the big cycle that defines the uptrend, and then the smaller cycles, which are not as impactful on price action, will give you layers of detail. Now, how many layers? It's up to you. You can even go down to an hourly chart and find even smaller cycles that are topping out, bottoming out all the time. But these will not explain what is happening generally to prices during that 15-month period. That will be given to you by the large cycle. The smaller cycles, they're just there for detail. They're just telling you, well, this one's bottoming out, so the trend may accelerate here, it may decelerate here. And so that is what proportionality means. The longer the cycle, the more it's going to move prices. The shorter the cycle, the less it's going to move prices. And again, this may be obvious to you because obviously the market is not going to move the same during a 10-hour period than it will during a month-long period. So proportionality is simply stating that and turning that into a principle. But make sure you understand that. Where this may be important and not immediately obvious to people, it's, let's say you're day trading. You're day trading on a 120-hour cycle. Now, let's say the 15-month low is due. 15-month low, according to the principle of proportionality, is far more impactful than a 120-hour cycle. So if you're day trading, you need to be aware of that larger component because it's going to push prices around significantly in that hourly chart. It's going to distort everything you see. Why? Proportionality. Long cycle, more important than a short cycle. So you need to be aware of these at all times, especially if you're day trading or if you're trading a cycle that is going to be pushed around by a larger cycle, which is why I always recommend to start with an awareness of where you are in the larger cycle, because that is really the one that is going to define the big up and down moves. So keep in mind the principle of proportionality at all times, and always be aware of what the larger components are doing, because those are the ones that are going to move prices the most.